here. Now, broadcasting from the underground command post, deep in the bowels of a hidden bunker, somewhere under the brick and steel of a nondescript building, we've once again made contact with our leader, Mark Levin.
Hello, everybody. Mark Levin here. Our number, 877-381-3811, 877-381-3811. In a few minutes, the National Security Advisor to President Trump, John Bolton, is scheduled to be on the program. And you know what we're talking about, Iran. Now, I hear it said that the President of the United States makes good decisions and bad decisions. Now, ladies and gentlemen, there are some times when a president, and this one, makes great decisions. This is a great decision. And a statesman-like decision, with a statesman-like speech to the American people and the world. And I know the media haters at MSNBC and CNN and all the rest of them, you know who they are, will be attacking this president. But I want you to understand that he's the center of the tent. He's the pole in the tent that is leading the world on this. Against the Europeans, against the Russians, against the Chinese, against the media, against the Democrats, against half the Republican Party. And he's right. And he's right. The deal with Iran ensures that Iran will have ICBMs with nuclear warheads that can hit our country. Isn't that enough to know? Barack Obama cut a deal with this rogue regime. John Kerry negotiated it. They created an impossible situation for our country, for your children and your grandchildren. They didn't shut down any Iranian pathway to nuclear weapons. They didn't dismantle a single Iranian nuclear site. They didn't shut down or even slow down Iran's ballistic missile development. They didn't require Iran to stop uranium enrichment. They did not require Iran to relinquish any of its enriched uranium, despite what you've heard. No anytime, anywhere inspections, no curbs on Iran's ballistic missile program, no maintenance of the arms embargo against Iran, no requirement that Iran limit, let alone stop its sponsorship of global terrorism, no requirement that Iran stop or even reduce its incitement to violence, no demands that Iran cease its calls for the destruction of its neighbors, including Israel, doesn't even demand that Iran stop launching terror attacks against Americans. It didn't make Iran more moderate. It enabled more dangerous Iranian aggression. The President of the United States, this one, having seen what the last one did, it would be absolutely insane for him to stay on the same course. Absolutely insane. And then to hear the argument, well, what will we do? What will we do? We know what to do. We did it before. Massive sanctions. We drove the leaders and that government to its knees until Barack Obama came in and saved them. The Iranian people rose up, you might recall. For 10 days, Barack Obama said nothing. This is a diabolical regime that has as its purpose the spread of terrorism. It funds terrorism. It's using the money that was released to them to fund terrorism, to fund their conventional weapons. And, of course, all prepared to go nuke. I understand the French. They make a lot of money in these deals. They expect us to save them. I don't know how many more wars we have to save the French. I understand the Germans. I don't much like the German government. Never have. We don't follow the French and the Germans and the Brits as much as I love our friends the Brits. Boy, oh boy. All right. It's a pleasure to have John Bolton, National Security Advisor to the President. How are you, sir?
Doing fine. I hope you're doing well, too.
I'm doing well. And for my audience and me, I want to thank the President and you and the people advising him, because this is a very, very important move that the President made. Tell the American people a couple of points. Why was this important?
Well, look, the Iran nuclear deal that was negotiated by John Kerry and Barack Obama was fundamentally flawed. It did not contribute to the security of the United States. In fact, it had exactly the opposite result. It was providing cover for Iran to continue to make progress toward an objective it's had for decades, which is deliverable nuclear weapons to threaten us, to threaten our friends in the Middle East and around the world. And the most effective way to stop Iran from getting deliverable nuclear weapons is give up the charade that this deal was having any effect on them and get down to putting real pressure back on, pressure that Obama never should have released.
And you say here, it said in the statement that the United States government's going to restore our sanctions that were working, that were in place against Iran earlier, correct?
Exactly. All the sanctions that Obama suspended 3 years ago are effective again immediately. We do have what's called a wind-down provision for some existing contracts. But the point here, as the president has put it, is maximum sanctions on Iran to make sure they don't get the revenue that they need to conduct their ballistic missile research, their nuclear research, their terrorist activities around the world, supporting groups like Hamas and Hezbollah, and their armed intrusion into many countries in the Middle East, like Syria, like Yemen, like Iraq.
What exactly did this deal stop? I mean, I don't even understand what it stopped. In 10 years after the signing of the deal, they're off to the races again.
Look, it stopped the economic pressure on Iran. That's why Iran loves this deal. It's why Iran was never going to renegotiate its terms. Why should they? From their point of view, it's a great deal. The only thing they regret in Tehran is that they didn't ask Obama and Kerry for more concessions, because if they had, they would have gotten more concessions.
Now, we'll put sanctions in place. What if the Europeans and others try and go around us on this?
Well, you know, a lot of European goods contain licenses of American technology, and again, effective immediately. Our sanctions are back in place on that, so it will have an effect on Iran's commerce with Europe. And we're going to be in conversation with the Europeans. This is a very important part of the president's speech to talk about how to move from the failed deal to the larger question of all of Iran's objectionable conduct in the Middle East and around the world. That was one of the basic flaws of the Obama-Kerry deal with Iran, is that it only addressed the nuclear issue and not the broader malign influence of Iran. So we're going to start on that beginning tomorrow. We've already had some earlier discussions, and I think that's very important, because we're not just throwing away this flawed deal with nothing to replace it. We very definitely have something to replace it, and it's important we get our allies' support for it.
Why do you think even members of the Republican Party, chairmen of certain committees and so forth and so on, were counseling the president not to withdraw from this deal?
You know, I think there's a certain feeling by a lot of people who opposed the deal to begin with that now you're kind of stuck with it and you can't get out of it. And I just don't agree with that. I think the president obviously respects their views. But as he put it, you can't build on a rotten, broken foundation. And to look at how to achieve our broader objectives, really the only way is to create a different reality for the Iranian regime and for the Europeans, try and cut off a lot of the investment funds that are going to go into Iran and put pressure back on them. The regime in Tehran responds to pressure. It doesn't respond to lifting the pressure. And that was another basic mistake in the Obama-Kerry approach. They thought that by negotiating this nuclear deal, they would change Iran's conduct more broadly. Not only has that not happened, but in the years since the deal took effect, Iran's conduct has gotten worse, as we see every day now in Syria, Iraq, and Yemen.
Iran's conduct, Syria, Iraq, Yemen. What is Iran's conduct now?
Look, this is an ideological regime that's trying to spread its control across the whole region. And the deal basically allowed them to continue to do that and to find a way to fund their activities. That we're trying to bring to a stop.
Mm-hmm. The sanctions were actually quite successful, and they were working before this deal, weren't they?
Well, exactly, and that's one reason that Iran wanted to negotiate, not to solve the nuclear weapons problem, but to get out from under the effect of the sanctions. And I think, again, Obama and Kerry just missed that point, and they didn't ask for nearly what they could have asked. I just think the entire worldview was mistaken, and I think what President Trump has done today is say we're going to look out after America's interest here. We're not going to hope that Iran modifies its conduct. We're going to act in our interest hope we can bring our allies and others along. We're going to get a lot of support for the president's action from the Arab states in the region, from Israel, from others who understand the threat that Iran poses. And we're going to continue to work hard on this. We're just not going to give Iran the free pass that the Obama administration gave.
John Bolton, how many presidents have you worked for, including this one?
Well, this is the fourth one, and I'm proud to be part of it. We've got a lot to do.
You've served 4 presidents. You and I served one together, Reagan. This is one of these historic decisions, isn't it?
It is. I think it's one of the most consequential decisions of the Trump administration so far, at least. And it reverses one of the 2 most important things that Obama did, both colossal mistakes, this deal with Iran and Obamacare. I wish we could reverse Obamacare as decisively as the president acted today on the Iran deal.
Couple quick questions, because I want to be mindful of your time. This Obama-Iran deal didn't shut down any Iranian pathway to nuclear weapons, did it?
No, it legitimizes the world's leading financier of terrorism. It legitimizes them as a state with a quote-unquote peaceful nuclear program. This was a lie that Iran has spun for years. The Obama administration accepted it without any significant investigation into Iran's military activities and without the possibility, really, of finding out what the military aspects of the nuclear program in Iran were through the International Atomic Energy Agency or elsewhere. So it's just very significant. It's significant because we're getting out of the Iran deal. It's also significant, as the president said today, for the signal it sends to North Korea and his upcoming meeting with Kim Jong-un, that we're not going to take a deal just for the sake of having a deal. We want real denuclearization. That's the objective, not blue smoke and mirrors, real denuclearization.
And this Obama-Iran deal didn't dismantle a single Iranian nuclear site, and it didn't even slow down their ballistic missile development, did it?
Well, it didn't. It didn't touch the ballistic missile development, and they're not engaged in that program to launch communications or weather satellites. The ballistic missiles are the delivery system for the nuclear weapons, and so it's another example of how flawed Obama's approach was. He tried to solve a small piece of the problem, did not succeed in doing that, and left Iran completely free to do dangerous things for the United States and a host of other areas.
Well, let me end it this way. I couldn't be prouder of the president, of this administration, of you for doing this. This was tough because you're under enormous pressure from within the government and outside the government and outside the country to do this. I think this is a bright new day. John Bolton, God bless, and thank you, sir.
Well, thanks for having me on, Mark. We'll be in touch.
All right, buddy. You take care. He and I worked together in the Justice Department under Reagan, so he is a buddy of mine. But that said, this is a very, very historic event, very important. The president will come under attack, and I want you to keep something in mind. That's the way historic events occur. That's what happens when he's a statesman. I called the president a statesman here because you see how they try to degrade him. You see how they smear him, the endless character assassination, 24/7 on MSNBC, 24/7 on CNN. I want you to keep something in mind. All these people on TV, these Lilliputians, have accomplished nothing in their lives, nothing substantive. And yet, they tear this guy down. I'll be right back.
Mark Levin.
You never really got any information from the media about the Iran deal, did you? Did you really get any information about this deal on cable TV at MSNBC and CNN? No. It's just, whose team are you on, and are you for or against it? So I want to go through this again so you'll know more than anybody else. This Obama-Iran deal that our president so correctly just withdrew the country from did not shut down any Iranian path to nuclear weapons, did not dismantle a single Iranian nuclear site, did not shut down or even slow down Iran's ballistic missile development, did not require Iran to stop uranium enrichment. In fact, the agreement obligates the United States to help Iran accelerate its uranium enrichment facilities and technology. The agreement did not require Iran to relinquish any of its enriched uranium. There's this claim that's repeated all the time that they already gave up 97% of its enriched uranium. It's not true. The deal required Iran to exchange its enriched uranium for an equal amount of uranium-1, easily convertible into low-enriched uranium. Now, the world didn't get in return really anything much, except a 10-year delay. No anytime, anywhere inspections permitted. No curbs on Iran's ballistic missile program. No maintenance of the arms embargo against Iran. No requirement that Iran limit, let alone stop, its sponsorship of global terrorism. No requirement that Iran stop or even reduce its incitement to violence, its threats against the United States, its threats against Israel, Saudi Arabia, Egypt, Lebanon, Jordan. Doesn't even demand that Iran stop launching terror attacks against Americans and American soldiers. That's the deal. Didn't make Iran more moderate. In fact, it funded their killing machine. They're more dangerous than ever. And it turned the United States from being the leading global opponent of Iran's nuclear weapons program into the world's leading supporter of Iran's ultimate right to mass-produce nuclear weapons. Is that not nuts? Well, President Trump, said it is nuts. And we're not obligated to follow it. Now, why are we not obligated to follow it? Because Obama, as we talked about at length at the time, circumvented the treaty clause because he couldn't get two-thirds of the senators present, the language in the Constitution, to ratify a treaty. So he wouldn't submit it as a treaty. He was bailed out by the likes of Mitch McConnell and Bob Corker, who concocted a statutory scheme in which the reverse would take place. That is, Congress, the full of Congress, would need two-thirds to override a presidential veto. More when I return.
Mark Levin, an unapologetic patriot and unapologetic constitutionalist. You can reach him at 877-381-3811.
You know, I've become a fan of a gentleman. I don't even think he likes me, but that doesn't matter. Charles C.W. Cook over at National View Online. He gets to the point. He usually gets to a good point. And he says, of course, we've been talking about this too, but look, this was not a treaty that the Obama administration got. It should have been a treaty. So you rammed it through that door, and then the president reached through that door and pulled it out. You can't say that you can unilaterally impose this on the American people in the world and that this president can't unilaterally reject it. And there are debates about what is a treaty and what's not a treaty. We do have international agreements that don't go through the treaty provision. But let me suggest this to you, and I've studied this extensively. This was unconstitutional, bypassing the Senate in this regard. This wasn't just some international agreement. This was a comprehensive nuclear, military, geopolitical, economic, international arrangement. Extensive. These are the kinds of issues that are covered by treaties. And when you bypass the treaty provision, you do great damage to the Constitution. That was reason enough to get rid of this. This president has done things I never thought I would see in my lifetime. I'm just being honest with you. And if Bill Kristol was being honest, and if Brett Stevens was being honest, and Jennifer Rubin was being honest, which they're apparently incapable of these days, they would say the same thing. But they're so filled and obsessed with hate They can't control themselves. They root against this president. They supported, in the past, the United States recognizing Jerusalem as the capital of Israel. That's exactly what Trump did. They supported in the past the United States moving its embassy from Tel Aviv to Jerusalem. That's occurring on Monday. I never thought I'd see it. They opposed the Iran deal, at least initially. I don't think there are very many Republicans who are running for president who would have had the courage to stand up to Europe, the Russians, the Chinese, the UN, the media, the Democrats, and half the Republicans, and do what Trump did today, which is vital to our national security, America's national security. And I want you to think about something else, because it puts everything in complete context. It really focuses things. If Robert Mueller had been successful already, none of this would be happening. If Robert Mueller and his band of Democrat prosecutors had already been successful, the President of the United States would have been indicted, maybe tried, unconstitutionally, of course, impeached, maybe removed. None of this would be happening. Does that put things in clear context for everybody? How dangerous Robert Mueller is? How outside our constitutional framework he is? And why he must be fought every step of the way? Every step of the way. Does this also point out another reality? How pathetically, insufficiently intelligent and competent our media are? Tomorrow morning, the same rat thinks and rabbit character assassins who dress up as hosts and journalists will be at it again, trashing the President of the United States. You know, Donald Trump could invent the cure for cancer, and it wouldn't matter. It wouldn't matter. Forget about these people. You are witnesses to history. Forget about these people. They're the munchkins of all time. You are witnesses to history. The president's dealing with North Korea, where he was trashed for an entire year, has been absolutely brilliant. Brilliant. People like to assign themselves labels. I belong to this intellectual group. I belong to this intellectual group. Really? People who have to assert they belong to intellectual groups? How about you show a little bit of intellectualism? Believe it or not, despite all the propaganda, and despite his imperfections, like we all have imperfections, by the way, President is smarter than all of them. Than all of them. Look, I have my disagreements on different issues here and there, but it's not the same as a historical event. You know, a tariff on this one, a tariff on that one. You know my views on that. But that pales in comparison with these seismic decisions that he's making. Pales in comparison. And his enemies want him to roll over. They just keep trying to beat him down. They question his mental competency. They question his marriage. They question his children. They question his wife. They question his businesses. Attack at every level, every media outlet, every investigative arm of the federal government, whether elected in Congress or not in the executive branch. And he stands up to them. They've never seen anything like this. I've never seen anything like this. And it very much upsets them because he won't roll over. Or he doesn't talk in monotone when they attack him. Or he goes around them. He is able to exploit social media like they cannot. He goes around them. He goes over them. He goes under them. Reagan used to give these magnificent speeches before there was this sort of social media. Trump plays to his strength. He doesn't give these long speeches, but he does tweet, and it drives them nuts. And it drives them nuts. Now, you and I, we're not part of the pom-pom boys and girls. We're not part of the Rockettes. We call them as we see them. But we call them as we see them. We call them as we see them. I cannot think of another Republican running for president, maybe Ted Cruz, that would be it, who would have rejected this Iran deal. They would have been cowed. They would have been told by the usual Republican establishment foreign policy types. They would have listened to Bob Corker. They would have listened to this Mac Thornberry, whoever the hell he is. They would be listening to these guys. I would advise against it. Who cares? And then you see the truly desperate and disgruntled, the malcontents among us, like Jeff Flake. Like Jeff Flake. Jeff Flake is trying to burn a path to a new career. But he can't. Because he already burned his career. He deceived the people of Arizona to get elected in the first place. But he's like a bad inner thigh rash. He doesn't go away. But that's his legacy. That's his problem. Now, I want you to keep something in mind. The Iranians wanted to keep this deal. Now, why would an Islamo-Nazi regime loaded with genocidal maniacs want to keep a deal like this if it's good for the United States? Why would they want to keep a deal like this if it's good for the Jews in Israel? Why would they want to keep a deal like this if it's good for the Frenchies and the Brits and the Germans? Why would they want to keep a deal like this if it's good for the whole world? Are they looking out for us? No. Because they can keep building their ICBMs. They can maintain their nuclear experiments. That is what they've already created. They don't have to dismantle a single nuclear site. They can continue to spread terrorism. They can continue to try and knock out regimes in the region. They can continue to spread terrorism and kill Americans. What a deal for the little Hitlerians. What a deal. Why not? And get $150 billion on top of it? Sure. And yet, the media in this country, for the most part, are special pleaders for this deal. They find themselves on the same side as the regime in Tehran. Isn't that fascinating? They're on the same side of the deal as the regime in Iran, the media. You know, they say politics ends at the water's edge. You know, you've heard that 1,000 times. But it's not true. It's not true. For 100 years, the Democrats have taken their politics overseas. For 100 years, the Democrats have imported their politics from overseas. It's called progressivism. And the ends justify the means. And some Republicans, too, by the way. Politics ends at the water's edge. Is that how they thought of the Vietnam War? The riots in the street, spitting on the men who came back? Really? I don't remember that. Do you remember that? Politics ending at the water's edge? When Ted Kennedy conspired with the Soviets against Ronald Reagan, was that politics ending at the water's edge? When John Kerry conspired with the North Vietnamese and the Viet Cong against our soldiers, was that politics ending at the water's edge? When so-called Speaker Wright met with Ortega and was giving aid and comfort to the Nicaraguan communists, was that politics ending at the water's edge? When Barack Obama reached out to the Castro mass murderers, was that politics ending at the water's edge? Don't hand me that crap. And when the Democrats try to enter into international agreements, I'm not talking about economic agreements. I'm talking about international agreements that challenge America's sovereignty, our constitutionalism, by exporting our sovereignty. to international governing organizations, as I wrote about in Liberty and Tyranny. Is that politics ending at the water's edge? Hell no. For them, it's always politics, because politics leads to power. Well, today, the American people won the day. Today, the free people of the world won the day. That's how serious it was what the president did today. It's about damn time, at least conservative outlets give the man the credit that's due, at least on this. I'll be right back.
Mark Levin.
All right, folks, we're going to get down to business now. Mother's Day's coming. So let's be real. If your big Mother's Day surprise consists of one well-crafted text message, you need to go back to the drawing board ASAP. Moms deserve more than just emojis. Do it right this year and celebrate Mom with this special limited-time offer from 1-800-Flowers.com. Right now, you can take care of all the mothers on your list. 1-800-Flowers will give you 24 multicolored roses plus a free vase starting at $29.99. Now, that's an offer that Mom would approve of. With a bright and beautiful mix of premium roses and a rainbow of colors, these blooms are guaranteed to make her smile. Multicolored roses are the perfect way to surprise all the moms in your life. Wife, aunt, sister, grandma. These breathtaking roses from 1-800-Flowers are picked at their peak and shipped overnight to ensure freshness. 24 multicolored roses plus a free vase starting at $29.99. That's an amazing offer. But hurry, because it expires Thursday. Just pick your you're running up against it here. Just pick your delivery date and 1-800-Flowers will handle the rest. Don't put it off. Order today. Go to 1-800-Flowers.com. It's what Mom would want you to do, right? To order 24 multicolored roses plus a free vase starting at $29.99. And for details, go to 1-800-Flowers.com, click that radio icon, and enter code Levin, L-E-V-I-N. That's 1-800-Flowers.com, code Levin. Hurry, offer expires Thursday. Now, I don't know what we're going to put in place of this deal, ladies and gentlemen. This is what you're hearing, the mantra on and on and on. It's quite simple. It's right here in the president's, and it's been released to the media, the Office of the Press Secretary, the National Security Presidential Memorandum. I just pulled it off the internet. The media can read it right here, but they don't want to read it. Here's an example. Section 3, restoring United States sanctions. Even Joe Scarborough might comprehend that. The Secretary of State and Secretary of the Treasury shall immediately begin taking steps to reimpose all United States sanctions lifted or waived in connection with the deal, including those under the National Defense Authorization Act for fiscal 2012, and it goes on. In other words, they're slamming it. The door closed, all of them, to Iran. And to any other country that uses relevant material and parts from the United States. So the crushing sanctions that were in place before Obama sold us out and paid off the Iranians will go back in place. No later than 180 days, but immediately. What else? Secretary of Defense and heads of this Section 4, relevant agencies shall prepare to meet swiftly and decisively all possible modes of Iranian aggression against the United States, our allies, and our partners. The Department of Defense shall ensure that the United States develops and retains the means to stop Iran from developing or acquiring a nuclear weapon and related delivery systems. Wow. Doesn't that sound like nothing? Sounds like a lot. And, of course, as John Bolton mentioned on the program at the top of the hour, the United States is prepared to negotiate a new agreement. But it'd be utterly different than what took place under Obama. And I'm waiting for the Pat Buchanan piece saying it's Israel's fault. Oh, yeah. Israel's behind the whole thing. Did you hear Israel anywhere in this thing? No. This is to protect us. The Iranians have killed our soldiers. The Iranians took our people hostage. The Iranians are torturing Americans now. The Iranians are funding terrorism. They've been doing this for 40 years. They've been our enemy. I didn't say adversary. I said enemy. But John Kerry doesn't know an enemy from an ally. Neither does Obama. Busy cutting deals with Cuba. Busy cutting deals with Russia. Busy cutting deals with North Korea. And now you have a president who says, you know what? That's enough. That's enough. And they hate him. The foreign policy establishment hates him. The media hate him. You understand what a cesspool all this is? You see this clown, the Attorney General, former of New York, we talked about last night as that news broke, Schneiderman. Before him, Spitzer. And Wiener with his wiener and all the rest of this crap that goes on. These people, they're all buddies. They all socialize. They all look down on you and me, which is kind of hilarious. And the fact of the matter is, they didn't think this president was going to run. I didn't. He told me he would. They didn't think he would win. They didn't think he could govern. And so they're trying to cripple him so that their wishes come true, not yours. All right, I'll be right back.
He's here. Now, broadcasting from the underground command post, deep in the bowels of a hidden bunker, somewhere under the brick and steel of a nondescript building, we've once again made contact with our leader, Mark Levin.
Hey, Mark Levin, our number 877-381-3811, 877-381-3811. Now, let me tell you something. Yeah, let me tell you something. Chuck Schumer, as you know, is the Democrat leader in the Senate. Chuck Schumer's Jewish, as am I. Chuck Schumer's a liberal, as I am not. Most of you in this audience are not Jewish. Some of you are. But I want to have an honest discussion with you. It's becoming increasingly clear to me that leftists, whether they're Jewish, Catholic, whatever they are more people of politics than they are people of faith. They wake up every morning and during most of the day are obsessed with politics, with the acquisition and exercise of power over their fellow citizens. They're not circumspect, like this guy Schneiderman, a rabid baboon. And he's not alone. And for the Democrats and liberals, even more than for Republicans, that's what matters. When you read that New Yorker article about Schneiderman, they were circling the wagons around this guy because he was the anti-Trump. There are people in the media today who come to you in the mornings and other times on television who've cheated on their spouses. They know it. I know who they are, some of them. But they get on there and they lecture you. They're immoral people. They've abandoned their values and beliefs, and yet they try and project this aura or this presumption that they're compassionate, that they really care, that they're the ones protecting us from us. And so I ask you this. Do you learn anything from the media in this country? What is the purpose of the media in this country? I'm not talking about the constitutional purpose. I'm not even talking about modifying in any respect. That's not my point. Is it not obvious that the purpose of the media, at least collectively, is no longer to report the news? I mean, I'm listening to the network news on my own show. I have no control over the network news. And they never do straight news. it's always Trump did this, but they say, fill in the blank, whoever his adversaries are, whoever his enemies are. It's like a short line on Trump and then 3 sentences on what the opposition is. What the Europeans say this. Well, who cares what the Europeans say? And we get this day in and day out, day in and day out. Here is a review by our buddies at the Media Research Center. The media get Trump. President's polls improved despite 90% negative coverage. 90%. Not 2-1, 3-1, 90%. By Rich Noyes. The liberal media's war against President Trump was as fierce as ever during the first 4 months of 2018. But the onslaught appears to be for naught in the face of massive and hostile coverage from ABC, CBS, and NBC. Trump's overall job approval rating actually rose from 37% in mid-December to roughly 43% at the end of April. We have 3.9% unemployment. When's the last time that happened? 3.9% unemployment. The president's trying to protect the nation and secure our border. A matter of justice and fairness and national security and law enforcement. Blocked at every step. He's trying to build up the United States military in the face of what the communist Chinese are doing and the Russians and the rest. And the media are focused on a porn star and her slip and fall lawyer, who's a Rahm Emanuel guy. Before that, the media were focused on Michael Wolff. Remember that author? Poof, gone. And before that, the media were focused on some psychology professor from Yale talking about the 25th Amendment. Poof, gone. Doesn't matter. Doesn't matter. And I'm supposed to sit here and think, oh, let's have a discussion with Jake Tapper. Oh, let's have a discussion with, well, who's the next one? I don't know. Unbelievable. Jake Tapper's revealed himself. A couple of years ago, I used to think he was a pretty straight-laced reporter. He's not. He's just not. I don't know how anybody witnessing him for a period of time could come to any other conclusion. I don't mind having a debate with people about policy and so forth, but he's supposed to be a reporter, right? Not debating policy and question policy. But Chuck Schumer, let me circle back. It is becoming increasingly obvious to me, and I share this with you because, honestly, I talk to you in many respects like I do my own family. I'm not a performing monkey here. I talk to you in many respects like I do to my own family. That an element within the Jewish community and the Democrat Party is more concerned about politics and the Democrat Party than they are their own faith. And if this starts a national discussion, I'm all for it. And by the way, not just Jews, Catholics too, when it comes to the abortion issue and so forth. But I'm focusing on what I want to focus on. Here's what Chuck Schumer said at a press conference today after the president withdrew from the Iran deal. Cut 9, go.
There are no reports that Iran has violated the agreement. And to me, the greatest worries from Iran are not right now the nuclear side, but rather what they're doing in Syria, what they're doing to arm Hezbollah with rockets, what they're doing with ICBMs. And to me, the right thing to do would have been to try and come up with our allies with an agreement on those issues.
Now, this is amazing. Keep it right there. The countries in the region, and those rockets are aimed at Israel, nobody else. Those Hezbollah rockets are manufactured by Iran, among others. They're aimed at Israel, and they're far more sophisticated than the last time. Estimated 150,000 rockets. Imagine 150,000 rockets aimed at the United States from either Canada or Mexico. Do you think we'd be trying to work with the Europeans to figure out what to do about that? Is that not a provocation? Imagine more. Imagine a terrorist group by Hezbollah, funded by the Iranians, on our border, northern or southern picket, with 150,000 rockets aimed at our cities, saying death to America, death to Americans. Funded by an enemy state. And Chuck Schumer sits here like he knows better. Like he knows better than the Israelis what the problem is. That I wish we could have worked something out with the Europeans. Who, the Germans? The French? Work what out? The fact is the deal doesn't prevent Iran from doing what Iran is doing with Hezbollah. Doesn't even mention it. Doesn't even mention it. This man is a sick excuse for a United States senator. And yet AIPAC will back him? Oh, yeah, they'll want him to speak at their convention because, of course, they're bipartisan. Oh, yeah, Chuck's always with us. Chuck's a good guy. Chuck's always with us. No, he's not. Go ahead.
Nuclear part of this continue as is because it's not being violated in any way. By dividing our allies, and I've just heard the president said he would impose secondary sanctions on European and Asian allies, you're making it harder to go after Hezbollah.
He's not making it harder to go after them. He's trying, quite frankly, to defeat the regime the way Reagan defeated the Soviet Union. That's what he's trying to do. Economic sanctions, currency sanctions, and so forth and so on. But Chuck Schumer opposed Reagan, and now he'll oppose Trump. Chuck Schumer, you see, for him, he's never on the wrong side of history because snake oil salesmen never are. Now, Chuck Schumer voted against the deal, but reluctantly, passively. He never campaigned within his own caucus against it. That way he can tell his Jewish supporters he was against it and yet tell the president that he was for it. But this is a bigger issue. This is a bigger issue. Chuck Schumer and others in his party want to remove this president. In fact, they'd like to see him hanging from a telephone pole by his ankle. Reference to Mussolini. But they want him destroyed. By hook or by crook. And I'm just explaining to you, my Levinites, my wonderful audience, that this president has not only stood up for our country, he stands up for our allies. And this president has been more supportive of the state of Israel, perhaps more than any president in American history, maybe with the exception of Nixon. But maybe not. And yet listen to Schumer. Special pleader for the Iranians. But ladies and gentlemen, you got to cut to the chase. Enough with the BS. He's a special pleader for the Iranians. The Iranians want the deal just as it is. So does Chuck Schumer. Oh, we can renegotiate it. Why renegotiate it? I thought it was the greatest deal since sliced bread. What's to renegotiate? Just to repeat. It didn't shut down any Iranian pathway to nuclear weapons. So in 7 years, they're off to the races. It didn't dismantle a single Iranian nuclear site. How do you renegotiate that? And why is this president bound by such a ridiculous agreement, such an insane deal? Didn't even slow down their ballistic missile development, didn't require them to stop uranium enrichment. No anytime, anywhere inspections, no curbs on Iran's ballistic missile program, no maintenance of the arms embargo against Iran, no requirement that they limit, let alone stop, global terrorism, including against us. No requirement that they release our prisoners who they're torturing. And it goes on. Can't we just negotiate a little better with our European partners? Now, our European partners are free to do whatever they want, except use anything that we provide them, in whole or part, in terms of sales to the Iranians. They can renegotiate a deal. In fact, the Iranians can renegotiate the deal. Obama's put them on the spot. Excuse me. Trump's put them on the spot. Trump has said, we can look for a better deal. Now, if the Iranians want a deal, now they have to come to a different president at a different table. And so it's actually a brilliant stroke by the president. But Schumer's a disgrace. In fact, the whole Democrat Party, disgrace. Remember how they would trash Trump and take up for Kim Jong-un? Oh, they would. It's Trump who's going to start a nuclear war, not Un, you see. Not Un, who is the prison guard over a prison state that has over 20 million people, most of whom are starving to death and many of whom are in political gulags. No, but it's Trump is the problem, not Un. Trump's the problem, not the Islamo-Nazi regime in Tehran. Trump's the problem, not Xi in China, not Putin in Russia. It's Trump, don't you know? And thank God for Robert Mueller, who's going to take him out, you see. I'll be right back.
Mark Levin.
This guy Rhodes, who served as the Deputy National Security Advisor for Strategic Communications to Obama, Ben Rhodes. There was an article back on May 6, 2016 in the Washington Compost, and he was fascinated with himself, was Ben Rhodes, for how he so easily persuaded the media to support his boss, Obama, which really is not a hard thing to do. And he said in the article, an article that had been written and was mentioned by the Post, the Compost, that is, it was a New York Times magazine originally, that it was easy to shape a favorable impression of the proposed agreement because of the inexperience of many of those covering the issue. Everybody can't be as experienced as Mika Brzezinski, folks, or Don Lemon. Quote, all these newspapers used to have foreign bureaus, he said. Now they don't. They call us to explain to them what's happening in Moscow and Cairo. Most of the outlets are reporting on world events from Washington. The average reporter we talk to is 27 years old, and their only reporting experience consists of being around political campaigns. That's a sea change. They literally know nothing. So Rhodes set up a team of staffers who were focused on promoting the deal, which apparently included the feeding of talking points at useful times in the news cycle to foreign policy experts who were favorably disposed toward it. He told the magazine, New York Times Magazine, we created an echo chamber. They, these seemingly independent experts, were saying things that validated what we had given them to say. The manager of the White House's Twitter feed on Iran, Tanya Samanander, and one reporter, Lauren Rosen of Al Monitor news site, became my RSS feed. She would just find everything and retweet it. Rhodes' assistant, Ned Price, told the newspaper that the administration would feed color, that is, background details, to their comrades in the press corps. He says compadres. We know he means comrades. And the next thing I know, lots of these guys are in the .com publishing space and have huge Twitter followings, and they'll be putting this message out on their own. So he's very proud of how the state, the Obama administration, controlled the narrative through the so-called media. In the article, Rhodes speaks contemptuously of the Washington policy and media establishment, including the Washington Post and New York Times, referring to them as the blob that was subject to conventional thinking about foreign policy. We had test drives to know who was going to be able to carry our message effectively and how to use outside groups like the anti-nuke group Plowshares, the Iran Project, and whomever else. So we knew the tactics that work, Rhodes says. Speaking of Republicans and other opponents, including Israeli Prime Minister Netanyahu, Rhodes adds that he knew we drove them crazy. Sick. Absolutely sick. And we also had, you'll recall, Josh Meyer, who used to write for Politico. Maybe he still does, but I think he's in somebody's witness protection program. Maybe Mueller got a hold of him. 2 long articles exposing far worse about this deal, the side agreements, how the Obama administration pulled back law enforcement and our intelligence agencies to let some of these vipers escape. Unbelievable. And the president fixed it today, took care of it, dealt with it, and we salute him. I'll be back.
This is America's Constitutional Convention. The Mark Levin Show. Call in now. 877-381-3811.
I'll elaborate on this a little bit later. Our Sunday show at 10 p.m. is a juggernaut now. An absolute juggernaut. We had a 1.4 rating, which means nothing to most of you, but let me put it in context. CNN at a 0.6 and MSNBC at a 0.7. That means if you combine the two, my show beat both of them combined. We also won the demo. It wasn't even close. They talk about the demo, 25 to 54. The show's getting bigger and bigger and bigger as more and more of you find us on Sunday night, 10 p.m. Eastern, 7 p.m. Pacific. It is the least reported media story in the country. You know, these networks say, well, a media reporter, and they have Ad Week, and they have all these, and not a word. Now, if I was falling on my face, there'd be more than a word. But I don't fall on my face because of you. So I want to thank you, folks, as that show gets bigger and bigger and bigger, and we love doing it. We think it's very, very important. You know, good news. Hillsdale College offering their free online Constitution 101 course again, but only for a limited time. So you need to register right away at levinforhillsdale.com, Levin for Hillsdale.com. Hillsdale is the authority on teaching the Constitution. You can take the course based on the same curriculum Hillsdale students use, taught by the same amazing professors. Close to 1 million people have registered. And if you haven't, you should. Now, I know this research I'm about to share doesn't apply to you, my beloved audience, but did you know 1 in 3 Americans can't name a single right protected by the First Amendment? The First Amendment. And only 25% can name all 3 branches of government. But get this, 33% can't name any branch of government, even one. Look, we need to help make sure that our fellow Americans understand not just those facts, but our constitutional rights, too. Constitution 101 provides you the perfect overview. So register. Go to levinforhillsdale.com. You'll even get a free pocket Constitution just for signing up. And you have to know liberty to defend liberty, and that's what Hillsdale College is all about. levinforhillsdale.com, Levin for Hillsdale.com. Pleasure to have my friend Eli Lake from Bloomberg on. How are you, Eli?
I'm great. Thanks so much for having me on, and congratulations on the Fox show. I DVR it.
You DVR, so you like it, right?
Yeah, it's great. No, it's in-depth conversations, and I always learn something, so it's great.
I appreciate it. Eli, we had John Bolton on the program. He gave us an overview of this. I see the pushback already in the media, and the more I go through this, I don't even know what the pushback is about. Help us.
I think there's a panic mode going on already. The big concern, and I'll say that I had this concern as well, was that if the U.S., if Trump got us out of the treaty, or I'm sorry, it's not a treaty, we should make that very clear, the agreement, then the Iranians would then kick out weapons inspectors and begin the enrichment, which would cause a kind of spiral and escalation and a crisis at a moment when the president is trying to negotiate better terms of our trade agreements with China, the North Korea thing, and everything else. I think that was the smartest, most honest argument about it. But so far, what was the reaction from the Iranians was to enter negotiations with the Europeans, who said they were still remaining in the agreement, in order to try to save it. And I think what Trump really exposed here was that this was not a win-win agreement for the West and the Iranians. The Iranians really very much wanted to stay in this agreement, which is important because at the end of the Obama administration, in its final year after this thing was implemented, what you saw was the Iranians kept nudging and threatening, like, hey, we might have to walk away. You have to make the terms better. And we saw all kinds of ridiculous things. John Kerry went to European capitals encouraging investment in Iran. I mean, this is crazy given the fact that the Iranians were waging a regional war all throughout the Middle East and, you know, testing missiles and all kinds of other things that we didn't like and we were trying to stop. So the very best at this point is to say that Trump got us out of that cycle and showed that the Iranians wanted the agreement and wanted this more than the United States. And that's a valuable position from a negotiating perspective. And we'll see what comes of it at this point, whether or not, you know, the Iranians will try to push the envelope. And you have to expect that at a certain point maybe they will. But so far, the first reaction is that they haven't.
But what about us? We want to remove that regime. And we can't remove that regime with crushing economic sanctions and attacks on their currency and all the rest that was taking place before Obama came in office, as long as we are basically protecting this agreement.
To a certain extent, you're right. But the interesting thing here is that the Iranians have done such a number on their own economy that their currency was in free fall before Trump's announcement. In fact, the value of the rial was even lower compared to the dollar than it was, before they were pressured to the negotiating table under Obama following those crippling sanctions. And that's largely because, as we both know, the Iranian regime is run by thieves and fanatics, and the banks themselves are frauds. There's been a run on the banks. There's a drinking water crisis right now in Iran. And this is also part of, there is a democracy movement which doesn't get enough attention in my view. And they have really gained momentum since late December when we saw a lot of those protests. And you were great on this. I remember your radio program. You were bringing attention to it. But that stuff has continued on. And there are things that a Trump administration can do that are, not, invading Iran or anything like that, but they can just establish a channel to the Iranian democratic opposition inside the country and try to do things that advantage them, whether it's pressing for the release of political prisoners like we saw under Ronald Reagan in the end of the Cold War, or it's specific sanctions that are targeted at things like their propaganda organs. And a lot of Iranian dissidents who I've interviewed have said that this is what they want. And now I think that Trump is has a great opportunity to do that kind of thing.
And I agree. You brought up Reagan, and I talk about this all the time with respect to China, North Korea, Iran. What they're doing here is basically using their own blueprint, sort of Reagan light when it comes to Iran. George Bush was doing the same thing. Obama came in, changed all that. And if, as you say, and I believe you, that their economy is this bad off, their currency is this bad off, more the reason to get out of the agreement and put the brass knuckles on in terms of trying to bring down the regime. The problem is the Europeans aren't thinking about it that way, but maybe the president is.
I think that it's the president in what he said. He mentioned the Iranian people, which was very good in my view, but he also left out the possibility that maybe later the Iranians would want to negotiate another deal. And my question is, what Iranians? I hope that I hope the Iranians that we negotiate a nuclear deal.
You have to say something like that. That's my view. Maybe I'm wrong. You have to say, hey, look, I'm here. You want to negotiate something else? What could we possibly negotiate with them? Seriously.
Well, I think you raise a very good point. But what I'm saying, he did not go as far as people like Dr. Michael Ledeen would say, which is the U.S. policy is regime change for Iran, full stop, similar to the National Security Directive and Reagan's first term with regard to the Soviet Union. And by the way, a lot of people will attack this position and saying you just want a war. No, I'm trying to avoid a war. The Iranians are the ones who are waging a war right now on all of our allies in the Middle East. They're the ones who take American dual nationals as hostages. If you want to stop this kind of aggression that could lead to a war, then you need to think about how to replace the regime through the Iranian people who are already organizing and agitating for democracy.
And in the president's statement, when I read also his the memorandum that he signed, he was pretty blunt. Iran would be making a huge mistake if it went to war. And also, to your point, if you go to war, you better be able to economically sustain it. And if their economy is falling apart, and I don't know that it's falling apart, if their economy is weak and they're up against, real serious military forces, including the Israeli military force, who knows how long they can last? It's, it's not Iraq versus Iran. It's Iran versus, civilized countries.
And also add to this, the new crown prince of Saudi Arabia has his own policy, which is similar to what the U.S. or what is now being reimposed by Trump, which is that he's telling other countries, you have to choose between working with us, investing in our economy, or investing in the Iranian economy. That's very interesting as well. So you're getting it kind of from a regional perspective, too. And so I think that the Iranians will try anything they can to have the Europeans save them in this moment, and we'll see what they agree to. What I'm concerned about is that, I think that the eyes should remain on the prize, and that is helping the Iranian people achieve a democratic transition from their brutal dictatorship. It's almost 40 years And I think that most Iranians are sick of their tyranny.
That can only happen if it's overthrown from within or without, obviously.
Obviously, and I think it should be overthrown from within, and I think that we've seen the signs that are there. They got close in 2009, and then, you know, as you talked about on the show, that Obama basically let him twist in the wind. But, you know, when we see a moment like that, hopefully coming up again, similar to what we saw in December, January, but as, you know, the momentum builds, I think the Trump administration would be much more receptive. At least that's my hope, and that the president would understand that that's the real opportunity and that's the strategic outcome that we need.
Now, Eli Lake, did you ever think you'd see that? Well, ever. Did you think you'd actually see this day?
I was skeptical, and I have to say that I was surprised, and I thought, you know, Trump was fairly straightforward, and I'm still a little bit concerned. What I worry about is that, you know, if they're desperate and they create a kind of nuclear crisis, like, you know, that could spin out of control. So
all right, but Eli, they're arming up for war. 150,000 missiles with Hezbollah.
True.
What they're doing in Syria towards Israel, what they're doing in Yemen with Saudi Arabia. It's not like this pushes them over the edge. They're over the edge.
No, I agree that they're over the edge in the conventional. What I was saying is that if I thought it was a bad deal, as we talked about at the time, I'm not defending the deal. What I was saying is that I thought that, but maybe it was too clever by half. My idea was let the fate of the deal kind of play out and have it be uncertain, and then focus on what I think is the main thing, which is to, you know, separate the regime from the people. And that is happening in Iran. I don't want to, you know, sort of fill with happy talk. We can't predict the moment that will happen. But you should see every week there are new protests. Women are taking off their hijabs. We're seeing it from all sectors of the economy throughout the country. This is it's getting to the moment where there's so many pressure points on them, and this adds to that pressure that I think that, you know, the Iranians will have to make a choice. And hopefully, with the Israeli, you know, efforts right now in Syria, and if the U.S. can kind of do that, then that pressures them in that front as well, and that they start having to make serious choices, that they can't sustain their expansionist war in the region, which is what
well, they're not going to go down easy any more than Venezuela will go down easy. It's totally different circumstances, but you get my point. Any more than
Absolutely.
Syria will go down easy. These dictators hold on, and but I do agree that there's rumblings going on here, and that's a good thing. But it is amazing how much these dictators can tolerate when their people suffer.
That's
Eli
true.
Lake, go ahead. You finish up.
No, I was going to say, that's true, but keep in mind, the key is to get the policeman to disobey the dictator. That's how it always is the sign, and that's the key, and that's what we have to focus on.
Keep up the great work, brother. Appreciate it.
Thank you so much for having me on.
All right, that's Eli Lake. He's very good. We'll be right back.
Mark Levin.
We salute all you heroes out there. Thank you, all you Levinites. I'm very blessed to have you. Check out Levin TV tonight, and I'll see you on the radio tomorrow. God bless.